In the interview, I asked the film emperor whether he had a secret crush. He called the person he loved right there in front of everyone. I stood to the side, watching the show with amusement. A moment later, my phone rang. The audience erupted instantly. On my first day at work, I was assigned to interview the popular film emperor, Antonio Spencer. My colleague Amy looked at me with glee, clearly waiting for me to mess up. Just wait, you're going to blow this interview. In the entertainment industry, everyone knew that Antonio was cold and distant. He didn't participate in entertainment programs and never accepted interviews unless they were related to promoting his films. Thinking there was no chance he'd agree, I didn't take it seriously. I messaged his assistant casually, "Is Antonio free this Sunday? Would like him to attend an interview." When preparing the interview questions, I wrote down, "What's your last name? How old are you? What's your occupation? When are you planning to have kids?" My best friend asked, "What if he actually shows up?" "That'd be great," I replied. "I'll call him God on live TV." But what I never expected was that the next day, I received confirmation that Antonio had accepted the interview request. So much for the rumors. This was the film emperor who supposedly did nothing but film promotions? As a superstar, Antonio had an enormous fan base and surprisingly good public relations. On the day of the interview, the studio was packed with fans. People in the audience whispered among themselves, "Oh my God, it's Antonio. Antonio. My husband. I love you. I'm so jealous of this host. She gets to be so close to him." Antonio's expression remained indifferent. His flawless face betrayed no hint of emotion. Dressed simply in a white shirt and suit pants, he exuded an effortless charm and elegance. Standing so close to him, I couldn't help but take a deep breath, stunned by his beauty. My coworker Amy, who always seemed to have it out for me, suddenly handed me a drink. It felt suspicious, so I didn't take it. She sneered, "It's for Mr. Spencer. Don't flatter yourself. The only reason you landed this interview is sheer dumb luck." "Is that so?" "Well, you haven't even been lucky enough for that," I thought to myself. Not wanting to engage with her, I took the drink and handed it to Antonio without paying much attention to her expression. I set the peach-flavored drink on the table. "Mr. Spencer, have a drink." Antonio's thin lips moved as if he was about to speak, but his assistant suddenly rushed over, looking displeased. "Mr. Spencer has already said he doesn't drink beverages," the assistant said sharply. The young assistant, who looked to be in his early 20s, seemed to harbor an inexplicable hostility toward me. I racked my brain and could only think it was because my interview questions must have seemed somewhat unprofessional. But how was I supposed to know this film emperor would suddenly decide to grace my insignificant little program with his presence? Just then, the audience began whispering again, "Doesn't the host know Antonio never drinks anything but water? And peach-flavored? He hates peaches. It's obvious he didn't want to come here. Poor Antonio." As a professional host, my first instinct was to take the drink away immediately. However, just as I reached for it, my fingers brushed against Antonio's cool fingertips. Startled, I quickly pulled my hand back. When I looked up, he was smiling, his lips curved slightly, his calloused fingers from years of acting gently caressing the glass. His voice was deep and melodious as he chuckled softly. "I actually like peach-flavored drinks." I was stunned. His assistant was stunned. The audience? Utterly dumbfounded. My heart skipped a beat as I tried to calm my suddenly racing pulse. Antonio lowered his gaze and took a sip from the glass. By the door, Amy was frozen in disbelief, her expression a mix of shock and frustration, before she shot me a sharp glare. I met her gaze with a polite smile and said, "I'd like to thank my colleague Amy for preparing today's refreshments. Let's all give her a round of applause for her hard work." Amy's forced smile twitched under the studio lights. "As long as Mr. Spencer enjoys it," she muttered awkwardly, then quickly strutted away in her high heels. From that moment on, everything seemed to go smoothly. Whatever I asked, Antonio answered without hesitation. Occasionally, our eyes would meet, and an inexplicable warmth would creep up my neck, making my heartbeat falter. Though the questions focused mainly on his acting career. The murmurs from the audience began to take a different turn. Why does Antonio seem unusually gentle today? Didn't he make a reporter cry in his early days? Is it just me, or do Antonio and the host look good together? They don't even know each other. Stop making things up. I focused on my script and, after much internal debate, decided to ask the only personal question of the day. Mr. Spencer, you're 27 this year. From your school days to now in the entertainment industry, have you ever had a secret crush? And if so, could you call her live? The moment the words left my mouth, I saw the show's live ratings spike dramatically. I knew this would get their attention. I smirked internally. Besides, Antonio's new film featured a subplot about unrequited love, making this a perfect promotional opportunity. Without hesitation, Antonio pulled out his phone and started dialing. But as soon as the call connected, my phone resting on the table suddenly began to vibrate. I nearly spat out the water I was drinking. Who the hell is calling me right now? Do they not understand how bad this timing looks? I glanced at the unfamiliar number and froze in thought. The atmosphere in the studio took an unusual turn. Why did Julia Dean's phone ring just as Antonio made a call? Could it be he's calling Julia? I have a bold theory. I glanced sideways at Antonio. His fringe partially obscured his eyes, but he remained composed as ever. With his signature calmness, he said, "What do you think? Will this mysterious girl answer the call?" I swallowed hard, squashing the impossible idea forming in my mind. Sliding my phone off the table, I hit decline. At the same time, Antonio's phone chimed with a call-ended notification. He glanced at the screen as his call was rejected, his expression unreadable. Meanwhile, I stared at the skyrocketing viewership numbers, caught between shock and a growing headache. The coincidence was so uncanny that even I almost believed I was the person he had called. After the interview, the entertainment news headlines exploded that night. Antonio's secret crush. Antonio and Julius rejected call. Antonio, I really like peach-flavored drinks. No one could have predicted that Antonio Spencer, the notoriously private star who had never been involved in any scandals, would make headlines with me, an unknown host. I panicked. As I watched netizens dig into my private life, I feared they'd uncover everything about me. Hastily, I posted a clarification: it was just a spam call, everyone. Please don't misunderstand. The comments were relentless. I don't believe you. Prove it by calling back. To my dismay, Antonio himself joined in and commented, I don't believe your explanation either. I stared at his comment in disbelief. Seriously, sir? Of all times, why are you stirring the pot now? I racked my brain. Could this have something to do with the drink? Was Antonio deliberately messing with me? With growing unease, I made my way to the dressing room. There he was, sitting alone in a chair, casually scrolling through his phone. Without even looking up, he said in a low voice, "Close the door, please." "Oh, okay," I replied and quickly complied. When he noticed it was me, he didn't seem surprised. "So, I heard that call you got earlier was a spam ad?" I nodded vigorously. "Yes, but I didn't take it. I declined the call." "All right then," he said, his tone laced with intrigue. "Don't you want to call back and see what it was about?" I choked on air, coughing uncontrollably. Is the superstar seriously this nosy? Who's interviewing whom here? I reached for my phone but quickly stuffed it back into my bag. Suddenly, an irrational fear crept in. What if there really was something strange about that call? For several days, Antonio's name dominated the trending lists. And right below it was mine. And just like that, I became famous. The company assigned me an assistant and prioritized numerous resources for me. Amy, meanwhile, was seething. "I never realized you had it in you to snag a film emperor," she spat, her tone dripping with jealousy. Behind my back, she spread rumors. I was being kept, I was shameless, and she couldn't condemn such behavior strongly enough. Yet, in private, she secretly tried to dig up the address of some wealthy mogul. I didn't have time to bother with her antics. I was too busy. During rare quiet moments, my thoughts would drift back to the call that had made me famous overnight. One moonless night, wrapped in my blanket, I finally decided to call the number back. The silence around me was so profound that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Hello?" A man's unfamiliar voice came from the other end. I was certain I'd never heard it before. So, it really had been a mistake. Relieved, I exhaled and was about to hang up when who called. Antonio's deep, magnetic voice came through from the other end of the line. Years of acting had given his tone a distinct, cool metallic quality impossible to mistake. I froze, my mouth hanging open in shock. The man who had initially answered the call replied, "It's a random number ending in 9997. Could be one of your stalker fans. I'll hang up." Antonio's tone suddenly sharpened. "Wait." There was a brief rustling sound before Antonio clearly took the phone himself. "Hello?" Panicking, I lowered my voice. "Hi, I'm Anna from an auto dealership. Are you interested in upgrading your car?" The other side went quiet for 3 seconds, before a soft chuckle broke the silence. "Julia?" I immediately hung up. This was absurd. At that moment, the realization hit me like a freight train. Antonio's earlier call about his secret crush was meant for me all along. That night, I barely slept. My mind was consumed with one thought. What if Antonio Spencer really does have a crush on me? What I didn't expect was the storm brewing on social media the next day. Antonio's on-set smiling video, "Is he in love?" I clicked into the trending topic and found the most liked video. The dimly lit scene showcased Antonio's chiseled features, bathed in warm golden light. Sitting on a tall chair, he had initially been focused on his script, his expression cool and serious. But the moment his agent handed him a phone call, his face softened into a radiant smile. If I wasn't mistaken, that timing aligned exactly with the call ID made. The comment section, meanwhile, was on fire. His agent was practically losing it. "I've said it 100 times, Antonio isn't dating anyone. Keep spreading rumors, and I'll sue each and every one of you. You think one phone call proves he's in love? Why don't you all apply to join Sherlock Holmes' team? I live with him 247. Don't you think I'd know if something was going on?" But netizens weren't letting up. Didn't he say he has a crush? Could it have been her who called? That goofy smile? I've seen the same one on my love-struck younger brother. He's totally in love. Look at him grinning like a fool. The moment I dreaded most arrived when an eagle-eyed commenter chimed in. Why do I get the feeling it was that host Julia Dean who called him? Wiping the cold sweat off my forehead, I silently prayed no one would notice that comment. Unfortunately, the internet always defies prayers. Within hours, they had dug up my alma mater, my high school cheerleading squad, and even minor details I'd forgotten about myself. To my surprise, it was uncovered that Antonio and I had graduated from the same high school. Back then, he was skinny, not particularly fair-skinned, and nowhere near as striking as he was now. But even then, his sharp, well-defined features stood out. It had been years since I'd left high school, and I couldn't recall ever seeing him there. Still, an utterly narcissistic thought crept into my mind. Could it be has he been harboring a crush on me since high school? This fantasy shattered 2 days later. Antonio's current film crew happened to be working near my company, so he would occasionally drop by my studio to interact with the audience, a pleasant surprise for everyone. Given his status, the company couldn't have been happier to provide him with a private space whenever he visited. But every time he came, my colleagues' eyes would inevitably dart toward me. Yes, they were part of the internet crowd as well. They even launched an online poll. Is Julia Dean the superstar's crush? The minimum bet was $5, and winners would get double their stake. As a result, I was suddenly surrounded by people trying to convince me about my supposed relationship with Antonio on a daily basis. Under the weight of their relentless pressure, I once again found myself sharing a frame with Antonio. That day, he had just returned to his lounge after wrapping up work. As I was about to knock on the door, I overheard his agent's angry voice from inside. "Why do you insist on coming here? Don't you know how to avoid being discussed? Be honest with me, are you secretly interested in that girl?" My hand froze midair, and I leaned against the door, eavesdropping silently. A moment later, Antonio's calm, cool voice rang out, "No." That single word was crystal clear. For a fleeting moment, I felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. So, everything he'd done these past few days was just for publicity? No wonder the trending topics never stopped, yet he never stepped forward to clarify anything himself. That evening, it started drizzling, the skies gloomy, and the wind picking up. When I reached the company's entrance, I realized I had forgotten my umbrella. Looking ahead, I spotted Antonio sitting in his car. The window was rolled halfway down, revealing his deep, contemplative gaze. Our eyes met briefly, before he turned and murmured something to his assistant. A moment later, the assistant stepped out and walked toward me. "Miss Dean, it's inconvenient to walk in the rain. Let us give you a ride home." Antonio's eyes curved slightly as he looked at me, a gentle warmth radiating from them. If I hadn't overheard his conversation with his agent, I might have still been trapped in the story he had so carefully crafted. Truly, he deserved his title as a film emperor. There wasn't a single flaw in his performance. "What are you standing around for? Go on. Julia, don't forget to ask Mr. Spencer for an autograph for me. I swear, the Pole Prize money is calling my name." My colleagues filed past, each throwing out their playful remarks. Amy approached, holding an umbrella. Jealousy was evident in her tone as she said, "Everyone knew it was going to rain today. Did you deliberately leave your umbrella at home?" Without missing a beat, I snatched her umbrella. "Let me borrow yours. You can take Mr. Spencer's car instead." Her angry expression immediately shifted to one of confusion, as if she were thinking, could such a great opportunity really fall into my lap? But when she reached the car, Antonio's assistant apologetically stopped her. "Sorry, the car is full. I'll arrange for another car to pick you up." My second interview with Antonio was scheduled for Friday evening. The theme this time was campus life, and the guests included two actors, Trevor White and Lily Blake. Originally, I was supposed to host the show. But in a last-minute move to chase clout, the company added an interactive segment where boys would do makeup for girls. To make things worse, they replaced me as the host with Amy and put me in the lineup as one of the participants. This meant I'd either have Trevor or Antonio doing my makeup. The recording started, and there was no way for me to back out. I quietly leaned over to Trevor and whispered, "Can you team up with me later?" Amy, ever the opportunist, caught sight of this and loudly announced, "Julia, are you trying to avoid being on a team with Spencer?" Her voice was so loud that everyone heard it. The audience immediately began overanalyzing, they're trying to avoid being discussed. Definitely something fishy going on. Antonio's expression changed. Is he jealous? I'll bet $5 that Antonio and Julia end up in the same team. As I sipped my water, I could feel the audience's imagination running wild. I shot a glare at Antonio, silently blaming him for stirring up all this gossip. Antonio, looking effortlessly dashing in his tailored suit, seemed to misinterpret my glance. With a slight smile, he said, "I'll team up with Julia. I'm not great with new people." I resigned myself to the arrangement, thinking that Antonio, being older and presumably having dated before, would know a thing or two about makeup. He held a brush in his slender, fair hands. His sharp nose and pronounced brow bones giving him an air of focus. Yet his techniques were clumsy, the brush waving unsteadily in front of my face. "Don't move," he said seriously, his expression one of intense concentration as if he were truly proud of his work. I held my breath, our proximity so close that I could see the depth of his dark eyes. Occasionally, my heart would skip a beat. From the audience, voices of excitement bubbled up, "They look so good together. Antonio should totally do a romance drama. Julia's side profile is stunning. Alright, spill it. When are these two going public?" My heart raced, but I desperately reminded myself, he's just playing along for the rumors. Lost in thought, I didn't notice him leaning closer with a lipstick until it was too late. Startled, I instinctively turned my head to the side, and my lips grazed the warm pad of his finger. Quickly stepping out of the camera's frame, I glanced at Antonio. To my surprise, the tips of his ears were flushed red. Wow, he's really committed to this performance. Meanwhile, Trevor and Lily had already finished their makeup and were now dressed in high school uniforms, looking like a pair of teenagers straight out of a coming-of-age film. Amy, pretending to be professional, began asking, does anyone have a funny or unforgettable memory from high school? Trevor went first. When I was a freshman, I fainted in the boys' locker room. Not sure if that counts. Lily followed, laughing. Once, I tried to walk down the stairs in heels for the first time, just like our teacher, and ended up hitting the physics professor in the face with my shoe. When it was Antonio's turn, he thought for a moment before sharing. I remember something from my sophomore year. There was a short-haired girl who accidentally walked into the wrong classroom. She sat down at my desk, ate the lunch I'd packed myself, and then had the audacity to say it didn't taste good. The audience burst into laughter and pressed Antonio for more details. And then? What happened next? Antonio chuckled, deliberately teasing them. Well, I might tell you all someday. Someone in the crowd boldly speculated, wait, don't tell me that girl became your crush. At that, all eyes including Amy shifted to me. I heard you and Antonio went to the same school, Julia, someone added. The smile on my face was beginning to freeze. It wasn't just that we went to the same school. The short-haired girl who walked into the wrong classroom and ate his lunch was me. At the time, I thought the meal was something my dad had dropped off for me, so I ate it without a second thought. Who would have guessed I'd grabbed the wrong lunch? Worse, that meal gave me a stomachache for the rest of the afternoon. Trying my best to keep my composure, I replied, yes, we were at the same school. Back then. Mr. Spencer was already a standout A-top student, socially adept, the star of the school. It was truly an honor to have been his classmate. Antonio suddenly interjected, you knew me back then? Of course not. But I couldn't just admit I hadn't known about him at all. His fans would have destroyed me. I dodged the question with a vague, sure, I guess. His voice lowered, his lashes casting shadows over his eyes as he looked slightly dejected. But you never accepted the love letter I gave you. The room fell silent as his words stunned everyone, myself included. I forced a laugh and replied, Mr. Spencer, you're such a joker. Antonio turned to the audience and smiled. I'm just trying to liven things up. Don't take it seriously. Antonio's offhand comments from that day, whether intentional or not, only fueled rumors that I was the girl had been secretly in love with. Everyone believed he liked me. What they didn't know was that I was merely part of his PR strategy. I scrolled through the trending hashtags, reading the comments under each post. From a poor student to a household name, harboring a 10-year crush. What a moving, epic love story. When are these two getting married? I'm already planning their wedding gift. I knew that call was meant for Julia. There's no way it was just a coincidence. Unable to defend myself, I logged into a burner account and started posting my frustrations. Doesn't this seem like a publicity stunt? 10 years of secret love? Come on, no one's that devoted in real life. Look at Julia's smile, it's clearly forced. She's obviously being dragged into this nonsense. The replies came flooding in, you're just a hater. You don't understand love. Have you ever experienced unrequited love? Clearly not. She's probably overwhelmed with emotion. Of course her smile looks unnatural. Even my best friend, who knew me inside out, called me. Why didn't you tell me you'd been involved with Antonio this whole time? And my mom? She barged into my room, beaming, and asked, so, where's my wonderful son-in-law Antonio? Are you hiding him from me? At this point, I gave up. Maybe being in a fake couple with Antonio wasn't such a bad thing after all. At least I was gaining fame and fortune, and it saved me from having to endure my mom's matchmaking schemes. Building up my mental defenses, I decided not to avoid Antonio anymore. Over the past few days, Amy had been snidely throwing comments my way, still won't admit it, huh? Acting all innocent, but who knows what kind of tricks you pulled behind the scenes to snag the film emperor. That call was obviously for you, and you're still pretending you don't know anything. Without looking up, I replied nonchalantly, yeah, it was for me. So what? You. She clearly didn't expect me to be so direct. You've gotten so bold you don't even bother pretending anymore, huh? Isn't that exactly what I'm doing? Antonio's filming today. I'll cook for him and bring it to the set, I said casually. Amy's incredulous stare nearly burned a hole in me as our boss approved my leave. The usually critical boss even gave me an unusually kind smile and said, "Go for it. You have my full support." I never forgot my assigned persona as the innocent, movidbitha filmemper stinayr crush first love. When I got home, I carefully laid out all the ingredients on the table and took a picture to post on social media. I still remember the first time I mistakenly ate your lunch. "This time, let me make one for you," the caption read. After that, I ordered takeout, plated it nicely, and posted another update. As expected, Antonio's fans flooded the comments. "I knew it. They're meant to be." Who wouldn't be moved by a decade-long crush from the film emperor? So sweet, so wholesome. Because I had dawdled too long, by the time I brought the food to the set, everyone else had already finished eating. Antonio was sitting alone on the side, and his eyes lit up the moment he saw me. "Sorry, I'm late," I said. "You've probably eaten by now, right?" His assistant interjected indignantly, "Eat? He's been waiting for you for ages." Feeling guilty, I apologized to Antonio. "I'm sorry, the steak's probably a bit cold now. It's fine," he said, smiling. "Since you made it yourself, I don't mind." "Oh no, but I didn't make it myself." A wave of guilt washed over me. I crouched nearby and watched him eat as a crowd gathered to watch the two of us. For a moment, I felt like I was filming a movie, with all eyes glued to us. Although I was initially tired, I couldn't afford to doze off with everyone watching. That afternoon, Antonio went back to filming, and I sat idly in a lounge chair nearby. Scrolling through my phone while nibbling on snacks Antonio had someone bring over. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, I found myself lying in an unfamiliar bed. Instinctively, I checked my clothes. Everything was in place. "You're awake?" Antonio walked in, holding a glass of water. Conveniently, I was thirsty. I couldn't help but think that if Antonio wanted to, he'd make an incredibly thoughtful boyfriend. Antonio never brought up the topic of creating buzz through fake couple rumors. Sometimes, while scrolling through online gossip, I'd casually ask him, "For a relationship like ours, don't we need to sign some sort of agreement?" Without missing a beat, he'd feign ignorance and hand me a prenuptial agreement. I could only sigh helplessly. This man has taken his role way too seriously. It was hard to wrap my head around the fact that I had become publicly known as someone in a romantic entanglement with Antonio. While walking down the street, a young fan I didn't know excitedly approached me. "Is Mr. Spencer nearby?" Without thinking, I replied, "Why don't you go ask him?" By that evening, rumors of an Antonio and Julia fight were already trending online. That's when it hit me our relationship had become a national spectacle. I needed to act a bit more considerate. So, whenever we were on set and people were around, I'd rush over to Antonio with an affectionate expression. "Are you tired? I bought you some coffee." If it was too hot, I'd fan him with exaggerated concern. Antonio, wiping the sweat from his brow, would finally speak up. "There's an air-conditioned room next door. Should we go in?" Glancing at the recording equipment and the crowd, I forced a gentle smile. Then, leaning close to his ear, I whispered firmly, "No." Antonio sighed, dabbing his forehead with a tissue. "Then why don't you sit down? I'll fan you instead." Was he trying to steal my spotlight? No. By the end of it, we were both flushed and overheated. On the verge of heatstroke. Fan A, "Oh my god, Julia is fanning Antonio." Fan B, "She's so sweet, no wonder Antonio's been in love with her for years." Fan C, "They're both blushing. How could anyone believe there's no romance here?" I smiled, resigned. Whatever makes you fans happy. This routine continued until Antonio had to leave for an out-of-town shoot. The night before his departure, we went out for dinner. I couldn't help but order a table full of dishes. Antonio started nagging, "Julia, I'm a little worried about you. Is your hand healed? Don't forget to apply the ointment. It'll be gone for 2 months. Call me if you miss me, Julia, are you even listening?" I was drooling over the seafood spread when his voice cut through my thoughts. That's when I noticed a server nearby staring at us. Feigning emotion, I said tearfully, "You're leaving, how could I possibly have the appetite to eat?" Antonio raised an eyebrow, his tone a little amused. But you ate so much at lunch. I coughed loudly to interrupt him. Just don't get annoyed with me, I'll call you every night. But in my heart, all I was thinking was, hurry up and leave. I want my single life back. After Antonio left, my life returned to a more ordinary rhythm. Perhaps I had gotten too used to acting alongside him. Sometimes, I'd buy 2 cups of coffee and instinctively want to text him to ask if he wanted one. On the 5th day after his departure, photos surfaced online of Antonio chatting with a female actor by the beach. In the pictures, he was wearing a short-sleeved shirt, showing off his toned arms, while the woman beside him wore a floral dress, her long hair flowing like a goddess. From that angle, their posture looked somewhat intimate. I recognized her immediately, Clara, the first actress Antonio had ever worked with. Oh my God, I never thought I'd see Antonio and Clara in the same frame again. I thought Antonio liked Julia? Does she know about this? Some even messaged me privately. Did you two break up already but just haven't announced it? Antonio's manager eventually stepped in to clarify on social media. Clara happened to be vacationing in the area, and Antonio had injured his arm during filming. Shed brought over some ointment as a friendly gesture. But the questions didn't stop. Antonio's injured, are you going to take care of him? These fans are too much. It was just a minor scratch on his arm. Why would anyone need to nurse him over something like that? I ignored the messages, but soon rumors about Julia and Antonio's breakup began to spread. When I saw that the situation was spiraling out of control, I decided to find Antonio in person. I didn't exactly sneak over to his set, it was more that Antonio was so focused on filming that his phone was practically unreachable. After speaking with the crew, they informed me that Antonio had been shooting all night, had a drink, and was now resting at the hotel. His assistant offered to guide me there, though his expression made it clear he didn't approve of me. His eyes seemed to accuse me of being the scheming woman who stole the film emperor's heart. Hotel, just the two of us, a drunk man. The moment I reached the door, my courage faltered. Why had I been so impulsive to come here? Maybe it was better to turn back. After all, the paparazzi had already snapped photos of me arriving. I could always claim I'd been there. He's been filming all night. He should rest. I'll come back tomorrow, I said hesitantly. The assistant rolled his eyes. You two are already in that kind of relationship. What are you being shy about? Then, before I could stop him, he knocked on the door loudly. Wait, don't. The door opened, and there stood Antonio. His hair was damp, and he was wearing a white bathrobe with the collar loosely tied, revealing a broad expanse of skin. Droplets of water trickled down his prominent Adam's apple, disappearing into the dark fabric of the robe. I awkwardly rubbed my nose, trying not to stare. Antonio paused, clearly surprised. What are you doing here? Why was I suddenly stammering? Before I could come up with a coherent excuse, the assistant gave me a gentle shove. It's not convenient to talk outside. Go inside and chat. Then, ever so thoughtfully, he shut the door behind us. I stood there, utterly dumbfounded. What could I possibly need to discuss with Antonio in private? My entire purpose here was to perform for the public, not to be alone with him. This assistant so unprofessional. When I snapped back to reality, I realized I was already in Antonio's arms. The crisp, clean scent of his body wash filled my nose, and my cheek was pressed against the heat surged to my face. Antonio's arm was wrapped tightly around my waist. He leaned closer, brushing against my neck as he murmured, I didn't expect you to come. I've missed you. But my attention was completely drawn to the wound on his arm, a gash, nearly 8 inches long. It looked deep, with the edges pale and water still clinging to it. Why is the wound still wet? I blurted. He shrugged nonchalantly. It's fine. It'll heal soon. He blinked his wide eyes at me. What's wrong? I sighed. Where's the first aid kit? Let me take care of it. Thankfully, I'd had my fair share of injuries growing up, so treating wounds was second nature to me. The room's air conditioning whirred softly as Antonio draped a jacket over my shoulders. Out of the blue, he asked, What made you come see me? My mind flashed to the picture of him and Clara looking like the perfect couple by the beach. Not like I'm here because I'm worried about our couple narrative falling apart or anything. But instead, what came out of my mouth was, "I saw the photo of you and Clara, oh no." It sounded way too much like I was jealous. Antonio paused, then quickly explained. "Don't misunderstand. We ran into each other by chance. She just happened to bring some medicine for my injury." I wanted to say something along the lines of "Clara's so nice. I wasn't overthinking it, whatever you have with her doesn't concern me." But instead, my eyes drifted to the first aid kit, and I blurted out, "So these meds are from her?" Antonio leaned in and gently patted my head. "She wanted to give them to me, but I didn't take them." Instantly, my mood lifted, like the clouds parting after a storm. But then I realized something was wrong. Why am I feeling this way about him? Valentine's Day came soon after. Antonio had finished filming and, with some rare free time, agreed to an interview. A reporter asked, "How do you plan to spend Valentine's Day this year?" Everyone eagerly awaited his response, expecting something extravagant like filling a room with flowers or pulling off a grand romantic surprise. But his answer was unexpectedly simple: "I'm going to watch a movie." And so, once again, I got pulled into one of Antonio's PR stunts. That morning, had even given me a gift, a limited edition necklace from a high-end brand, the only one of its kind in the country. Suspicious, ID double-checked online to ensure it wasn't a knockoff. The cinema was packed with couples that day, but Antonio had booked the entire theater. As we took our seats, the emptiness around us was almost surreal. It was so quiet I could hear the sound of my own breathing. For a moment, I found it oddly nice. No interruptions, no distractions, just the two of us watching a movie together. But ID stayed up too late the night before and was particularly drowsy. Before I could make sense of the film's plot, I drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, I hadn't even opened my eyes yet. Half asleep, I tugged on Antonio's sleeve and murmured softly, "Is it over? I'm so tired." Then I felt a shadow leaning over me. His lips, soft and a little cold, pressed against mine. My heart felt like it was about to explode. Weren't we just supposed to be acting? "I don't want to act anymore," I told Antonio. It was late, and he had just driven me to the underground parking lot. Had wished me goodnight moments earlier when I dropped those words. His brow furrowed slightly, and for a moment, he seemed lost in thought. "What?" I said, "I don't want to act with you anymore." It took him a moment to process. "You think all this time I've just been acting with you? Isn't that the case?" I replied, my voice wavering. Creating the persona of a devoted, love-struck man saying it out loud left me feeling disoriented. I suddenly realized I could no longer treat this as just an act. ID started to care about him. "I overheard you and your agent talking that day," I admitted. "What conversation?" "You know what I'm talking about. This whole situation, how much of it is about feelings, and how much is just calculations and profit." He frowned, confusion flashing in his eyes. "Did you misunderstand something?" I recounted the conversation word for word. "Your agent asked if you liked me, and you told him firmly that you didn't." "When did I ever?" He trailed off, then let out a helpless chuckle. "He didn't just ask if I liked you. He asked if I secretly liked you. And you said you didn't." "That's right. I didn't." His eyes curved slightly as he smirked. "Julia, I've never hidden how I feel about you. I thought I made it clear enough." So the problem wasn't the denial, it was the word secretly. Under his intense gaze, my cheeks grew hot. It hit me like a tidal wave, all the assumptions I'd been wrestling with were baseless. That evening, Antonio walked me to my door and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. "When I told you I liked you at 17, it wasn't a lie," he said. "And when I said I'd had a crush on you for 10 years, that wasn't a lie either." For some reason, my eyes felt warm. That night, I dreamed of high school. I wore my old uniform, listening to music while reading on the track. And there was always a boy lingering just behind me. While Antonio and I were basking in the glow of newfound affection, the internet was exploding. A tabloid published a blurry photo of a certain host entering a hotel with a real estate tycoon. The image was grainy, only revealing vague outlines of the individuals. Initially, the story didn't gain much traction. But 2 hours later, someone pointed out, that woman is clearly Julia. Look at her figure, it's unmistakable. At first, netizens didn't buy it. Stop making stuff up. I could just as easily claim it's you in the photo. Seriously? Julia would ditch a gorgeous, fit film emperor for some pot-bellied old guy? Anyone with half a brain can see this isn't Julia. But Amy's comment changed everything. Amy, I've worked with Julia for years. I can tell it's definitely her. The internet erupted. Wait, no way. Did she cheat on Antonio? I've always thought she seemed too slick for her age. How else would she have landed so many interviews and big gigs so quickly? Maybe her relationship with Antonio was just for show, and there's a wealthy backer behind the scenes. While all this drama unfolded online, I was blissfully unaware. Why? Because I was lying in bed, nursing a stomachache after drinking Antonio's homemade soup and blaming him for my misery. Antonio, did you poison me? I groaned dramatically. The first time I accidentally ate your lunch, I got a stomachache too. Clearly, your cooking skills need serious improvement. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to the hospital. What if you actually killed me this time? Antonio had been genuinely worried at first, but as soon as I got up, his expression shifted. His face turned red, and he awkwardly pressed me back down onto the bed. Wait a second, he stammered. I'll go buy something for you. That's when I realized what had happened. I reached back to confirm. And my face heated up to match his. For the next hour, Antonio didn't let me live it down, teasing me relentlessly. It was during this comedic interlude that his phone rang, and shortly afterward, he saw the wild rumors circulating online. His expression turned icy, and the rare intensity in his demeanor made even me a little nervous. Antonio posted directly on social media, Julia has been sick these past few days, and I haven't left her side. Please stop spreading false rumors. Shortly afterward, someone revealed that the woman in the blurry photo was actually Amy. Well. She might not excel at her job, but her smear campaign skills are top-notch. The clothes in the photo didn't even match Julia's style. Wow, Amy really went out of her way to self-destruct. No one was targeting her, but she still decided to jump into the mess. With the truth exposed, Amy became the laughingstock of the internet. Overwhelmed by the backlash, she resigned from the company. After Amy left, the company hired a new male colleague, who was assigned to sit next to me. He was young, enthusiastic, and eager to learn, so I often found myself sharing tips with him though, to be fair, I didn't have that many to offer. One day, we were standing at the office entrance chatting when he suddenly whispered, Julia, isn't Spencer here to pick you up? What? I looked around, confused. When did he get here? He's been parked there for about 20 minutes, the colleague replied, motioning toward a car that had been idling nearby. Feeling guilty for not noticing, I quickly said goodbye and got into the car. Why didn't you let me know you were here? I asked as I climbed in. Antonio was sitting in the back seat, wearing a baseball cap. He tapped his finger on the armrest and replied coolly, didn't want to interrupt your conversation. That tone, oh. Something was off. Now, Antonio has many wonderful qualities, but his jealousy is no joke. Because of our busy schedules, we don't get to see each other often, which leaves him a little insecure, especially when it comes to younger, enthusiastic guys I work with. That evening, he had me pinned against the wall, making me repeat over and over, I swear, you're the only one in my heart. But honestly, can you blame me for enjoying the attention? Those fresh-faced young coworkers really are a bit too charming. The first time Antonio and I went home for Christmas, the house was suddenly packed with people. There were my mom's relatives, her distant relatives, my dad's relatives, and his distant relatives. Almost everyone showed up. And of course, many of them were Antonio's fans, eagerly lining up for autographs. Some relatives even brought their kids, who sweetly called us Uncle Antonio and Auntie Julia. Antonio patiently entertained them, handing out Christmas gifts, one by one. Jokingly, I asked him, where's my Christmas gift? Before he could answer, my mom chimed in with a teasing smile. You're too grown up to still expect gifts. Antonio nodded in agreement. Mom's right. Pretending to be offended, I huffed and walked away. Later that night, after taking a shower, I lay in bed scrolling through my phone. My hand brushed against something hard under my pillow. Curious, I pulled it out and found an exquisitely crafted box. Opening it, I was greeted by the sight of a ring. Antonio was still in the bathroom. Without hesitation, I got up and wrapped my arms around his waist from behind. He froze for a moment, his breathing heavy, before his voice came out low and husky. "Don't start anything, we're still at your parents' house." Ignoring him, I nuzzled against his back and murmured, "I love you so much, Antonio." The end.